We were talking about this, Jeff. The other day I had, you know how it goes, like you get people down the application portal for coaching, and we have our categories, right? Like you're like, oh, this is one of those, and you think you've seen it all. But had a man in his 40s who wanted coaching, was like 6 months into training, something like that. And I'm like, oh wow, that's different. Like you don't fit a lot of the profiles that I see over and over, where you kind of know what you're going to do almost ahead of time. Like, they think sometimes they're going to tell you about themselves, and you're like, no, let me tell you about yourself, bro. Like that's kind of how that convo goes. Respectfully, of course, like we still listen to our people, but again, like you've seen most of it, like at a certain point. So yeah, it got me thinking, like, hey, maybe that'd be a good topic for this, where we go over certain scenarios that we see over and over that might resonate with someone out there that's like, oh shoot, like that's me. That's how they would figure out me. So yeah, I guess in short, Jeff, like what is like the most common thing you see when, people finally get to the point where they're like, all right, I'm gonna stop trying to do my own plumbing and hire a plumber. What do you usually get down that pipeline?
I think it's a mixed bag. But as of late, kind of like you, I had one interesting case where a 55-year-old guy that just started seriously training this year. A couple of heart attacks, which was really interesting. The doctor, of course, gave him the all clear. He's been changing habits and all that, but his goal is to get jacked. Like he literally wants to get jacked at 55, which I thought was pretty inspiring. But of course, I'm like, okay, this is kind of an interesting case because there's more to it than just getting jacked. Like we got someone who's had obviously some heart issues, also some diabetes thrown in there as well. So it's like, okay, I got to think about overall health as a priority because, what I don't want to do is like steer this gentleman towards a path of, self-destruction. Like, okay, we're going to dive immediately into a contest prep or anything like that, which that is kind of a goal of his as well. At some points, like this can turn into a contest prep. So it's like, okay, how do I basically create these steps for this person, kind of go to where he wants to go? And I think all people that come to us, like the common goal is what? Like everybody wants to get jacked, wants to be lean at recomp. That's always just like, okay, but what's the trajectory look like? And it's going to vary depending on the individual. This specific gentleman, like our initial goal is to just learn some good habits, learn good habits with nutrition. I got to make sure his training is on point. So we talked in depth as far as like how we're going to construct that. So I got that all laid out. But now I need to kind of know more or less like what it's going to look like after he's kind of ran that a little bit. But initially it was just getting to learn him, what his goals are, what that history looked like. Because obviously without knowing someone's background and history, it's really hard to figure out like the best approach moving forward. And then just putting that plan in place and then starting to run it. But that was definitely a unique case because I've never had anybody with that type of issues before. Usually, like our common cases is, people just want to end up getting like recomping or they want to get to the stage. And oftentimes they just don't have the right trajectory in line. Like their expectations of how to get there isn't in line with what we're usually thinking about. It's kind of like you said with your guy, like you have to tell him like what he actually needs. Instead of him telling you, it's like you have to actually tell them what they need. And that's where your experience comes into play, my experience comes into play, and the rest of the coaches here comes into play because, we have decades worth of experience. So it's just like figuring out trajectory, figuring out goals, and then kind of going from there.
Yeah. Those were two weirdos, I guess, that we got. Usually you've seen it all. My guy was rather entertaining because this is such a boy call. He was like, because he started with a little weight loss. it was weight that accumulated over like many years. He's like, well, I'm just gonna stop drinking and eat once a day. Problem solved, and that's it. Didn't think much of it, And I'm like, that sounds like something I would like totally vibe with in your situation. It's like, okay, simple enough. Yeah, you do these things and you don't have to worry about it no more. But you totally unique situation. However, so what usually happens, what I get a lot of is, and I actually, I think I posted something on this the other day where people end up kind of being like these one-trick ponies, like when they do this fitness thing. And it usually has to do with whatever their most impactful or first intervention was. So if you're someone who, I don't know, let's make up something, 5'10", 280 pounds, not a good 280 pounds. We're not Jay Cutler, 280 pounds. It's just good or bad depending on how you look at it. Right? So not healthy, right? They lose all that weight, and what ends up happening is that, like, okay, great, that was successful. That really changed their bodies and their life, actually, at that point. Like, and that move was so impactful that it becomes a game of like, that's almost all they know or trust. Then it's the other way around too. Someone who, like, that was me actually. Like I started skinny. So for me, like, it meant like every time I would start a diet, this is one of the reasons that I did like bulk up to just these odd places, like that. I'm like, wow, I can't believe that was me. Was because
the 5'9", 250.
Yeah, because I would.
But you're talking about yourself, because the 5'10", 285. So you're kind of just changing numbers. That's really you're talking about, huh?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, and you can there's many ways of looking at this. Like, it's not just the gaining and the cutting, but it's whatever you did initially that really sparked a lot of change for you. But I think with gaining and cutting, actually, it's extra hard because they're contradicting. One is anabolic by nature, one is catabolic. Like, so they're the exact
opposite. And they're usually done in extremes too. Like, people do them in extremes. Like you're kind of saying, like the one guy coming down is a one-trick pony.
Yeah. Usually that's how it is, like, your first time, because it's very straightforward. Both of them are pretty straightforward. Like, mine's was in extremes when you think about it, right? It's just like, hey, just keep gaining weight and lifting weights, and hey, like, it did change the way I looked, but then it got to the point where it's like, hey, maybe you need to throw in a little cut here. And I would try to, but like 3 weeks in, I'm like, I don't like how my training's going. I don't like how I'm looking. I don't like how I'm feeling. Let me go back to what I find comfort in. So quite often we get people with like these disproportionate skill sets, not to say that whatever that they were doing with themselves most of the time was like as polished as it needed to be, but they're just very lump-sided in that, like, the other thing they don't trust. And usually, like, what they do is they hire us to have to look over the situation and have someone there, have someone help this like work out. Because I think internally they know that, okay, I'm kind of lump-sided. I rely too much on like pressing this button when I should be pressing that button.
Because it leads to extremism. Because the one gentleman I'm talking about, before us, he was kind of just diving into his own research. Like, he was following, other content providers and really just going all in. It's like, hey, I'm gonna start this thing. I'm gonna get into this weightlifting thing. He went all in, and what it ended up doing was, he said he was very adherent, very structured, and super rigid, basically. And he kind of realized, like, after his wife said, hey, you're on your phone, you're tracking your food, like, you're here with me, but you're not here with me. Like, you're not even present. So he's like, I realized after she told me that I need to, like, change my ways. Like, I need to learn other skills in order to kind of attain my goal in a more practical and sensible way. So that's what he was kind of looking for with our call. He specifically reached out to me to work with me because of the balance factor of, like, just doing things a little bit more from a practical sense. So yeah, it was kind of interesting, like, hearing where he came from in that regards. Like some of the things that he was doing and following, it really didn't jive too well with just like normal life, like, in the gym and week number 4 of the block, training with a gazillion sets and being there for 3 hours, and then kind of, having his wife like, okay, you're not only at the gym for 3 hours, but now you're on your phone tracking your food for another hour before you even eat your food. So those types of things. So it's like unlearning a lot of that. And then he even kind of mentioned to me, like, that was his comfort zone, like, because he knows it worked. So he didn't want to steer away from it because that's where he was comfortable doing. So that's why he reached out to us to figure out, like, okay, what's another way to do this that's might be a little more sensible. So it's interesting how sometimes when we get immersed in this sport, it's like we're kind of all in. And if we're not all in, if we start messing up, then it's like some people just go all out. So I think it's important that we're kind of finding like those shades of gray, trying to find ways where people can basically incorporate some tools to get them from, A to B in a sensible way.
Yeah, I mean, quite often that's what we do is we end up taking things off people's to-do list, right? Usually they think it's going to be the other way around where it's like, I can't wait to...
Yeah, and I kind of told him too, I'm like, I think what keeps my job in place is those people that are trying to make everything like hyper-focused, hypersensitive, like basically like majoring in the minors. Because again, what all that does is create a lot of stress for people. And I think you probably do this too. I mean, you correct me if I'm wrong, but like I unravel a lot of that. Like I simplify things for people. So instead of like having their focus on all these moving parts, it's like, hey, let's remove some of this excess noise and let's keep you more in here. That way you have more focus, and then we can actually see what works, what doesn't work. But it's just this is a tough field. We get out there in social media land, there's so much information, and a lot of it, it's just really hard for someone who's new to kind of sift through that. So like during that initial call, again, it's like just breaking down everything, like their whole life context, and like figuring out, okay, what noise do I need to remove here, and what do we need to focus on in order to move ahead as optimally as we can.
Yeah. So yeah, it's usually people doing too much when it comes to one side or the other, whether it's like botched fat losses or they're not as common anymore. But like thermal bulkers used to be a thing, like folks that, it's like, bro, you have no idea how to not just set up a fat loss diet, but how to tolerate one, which is it's an important skill. Like if you want a complete physique at some point, you will have to see fat loss. But yeah, most of the time it is just that. It's like we take this list of things that they think they were doing, and it's like, all right, let's just condense it to these few things, and let's get even better at how we perform these few things. And like before they know it, they realize that, oh, okay, it's like this is literally driving the progress at this point. Because, I mean, think about it. It's kind of like having I'm looking at my desk and I'm thinking about this, like a cluttered desk, right? Like when things are just cluttered and all over the place, it's just not it's a hard environment to really do your best work in. And that's exactly what happens when you spend like too much time listening to like this person, that person, which again, like most of the time, like we're fighting over like the 10%, like the 90% of what works is like pretty much like settled and good. So yeah, I'd say outside of decluttering for people, like that's a big thing we do. We declutter, we make them, because again, there's things that you're naturally good at, and then there's things that you're naturally not as good at. Like people tend to avoid those. I think that's the other thing. So for example, you will have athletes that are maybe very good at training hard, but they're very bad at stress management and organizing themselves outside of the gym. So when they find themselves stuck, what they will do is like, I just need to train harder. And it's like, bro, like you already like do a fantastic job at that. Like let's work on like these other things out here, because that's like pretty much taken care of. And you have things where it's like the other way around, where people are live these, they shop at Whole Foods. They have like these like super like crystals all over the house. Like they go to sleep at the same time, like all that jazz. But like they they don't train very hard, right? So yeah, it's like you have all these levers to pull, and I think people tend to pull the levers that like comes most like natural to them, and then the other ones they kind of ignore. So I mean,
so I think for us too, like on that initial call, right? Like we're continuing to talk about that. It's like in order to kind of learn these things, like you actually have to converse with people. Like you actually have to spend time with people, like getting to understand their personalities and how they tick and how they operate, and sometimes if you're not really connecting too well one-on-one, then, you have to be able to have people open up to you in order to kind of understand like what their world looks like and how they operate. So I do spend a decent amount of time like being inquisitive and asking questions, during that initial call. Like sometimes that call can last, 1 to 2 hours, just depending on how much, context we need to sift through. But I think it's super important that you kind of mentioned as far as like how they do things, not just like in the gym, because obviously we can watch form videos and see what their technique is looking like, see how close to failure they're going. But just getting a picture painted as far as like what their real world looks like, as far as their occupation, like family life, social life, etc. Because like you said, sometimes people are like inside the gym, they're on point, but outside the gym, not so much. And then sometimes if you're on point in the gym, and if you're also spending maybe too much time in the gym, then you can negatively impact the things outside. And then your priorities tend to be out of whack a little bit. And eventually that's going to rub off on what you are doing in the gym. And that goes both ways. So I think just having like the open communication, with your athletes is super important. And I know you do a pretty good job with that, because you definitely are very inquisitive with my stuff. And I know how I tick and operate, the last 13, 14 years. Like sometimes you just say one word to me and I'm like, oh, okay, I need to fix this.
Yeah, no, you have to be nosy, man. But I think most athletes understand that because it seems like like very natural questions to ask, because bodybuilding, especially once it's gotten pretty high in your like high up in your priority list, not higher than it needs to be, but once it's like there and it's present, that's the one thing you notice. It's like, okay, shoot, I have to make this work with like everything else that I need to show up for. So usually the questions that they're like, okay, like this is nosy, but I see why you're going there, right? But nosy things like, what does your significant other, wife, think about like what you do? What do your friends think about like what bodybuilding is done for you? Are they supportive? Are they not? All that stuff.
Jers, this is Andrea Valdez popping in real quick to tell you all about our latest course in the 3DMJ Vault titled Bodybuilding Program Design. This course starts off with over 2 hours of material from Dr. Eric Helms, our Chief Science Officer, who delivers all the evidence and theory to teach you exactly why and how to set up your training volume, intensity, and frequency for maximum results. Then, Coach Alberto Nunez will share 3 full example training programs he's created, so you can see how the principles play out in action based on whether you want to emphasize your upper body, your lower body, or create something a bit more balanced. And lastly, Coach Brad Loomis will show you how to take those programs and track them in an interactive, customizable spreadsheet that you can download and tailor to your specific plan. By watching this course and studying the principles, we're confident you'll know and understand more than like 99% of the lifters at your gym. You'll also be free to intelligently adjust and tweak your training plan without ever having to start from scratch again. Bodybuilding Program Design is now the 20th course in the 3DMJ Vault, which is our online learning platform of organized video-based education for serious lifters. You can become a Vault VIP member to get access to every single one of those courses for just $16.99 per month or $79.99 per year. This means that once you complete this foundational course, you'll have access to everything else you need to expand on your training education, like our advanced deload guide, our lagging body parts course, and so much more. You'll also have access to our quick start guide, along with the entire 40 plus videos in the lifting library to select the right exercises to fit your newly built customized training split. And lastly, additionally, VIP members also get access to our suite of nutrition setup courses too. That includes the Calculating Your Calories course, Calculating Your Macros course, Sustainable Fat Loss, and tons of other great resources built into the subscription. So go to 3dmjvault.com and sign yourself up today. That's 3dmjvault.com to get all access. Thank you so much for listening and enjoy the rest of the show.
What's the hardest kind of athlete for you to work with, Jeff?
It's the overanalyzers.
Okay.
It's the overanalyzers. It's the ones that think they need to hyper focus on things, like again, major in the minors. The ones that want to probably do more than what they really should be doing. People who are like incredibly over eager, those are more challenging. I find it more challenging to sometimes pull people back versus nudging them along. I'd rather have someone, like I'd rather nudge someone along than them, like someone just trying to always do more than they should be doing. Because that usually ends up not just like derailing their overall bodybuilding progress, but that type of like tendencies tend to drift outside the gym as well. So it's learning to pull people back. I think that's big. That's more so like the biggest challenge. But I do like people who are like want to be go-getters, because it, in a sense, it does make it a little bit easier to like structure. Like, okay, hey, here's our structure, here's our timeline. Then they're like, okay, we're ready to get after it. But along the way, it's more like, I want to be driving 100 miles an hour when you should be driving 80. Let's not get in a wreck, that type of thing. What about you?
Probably the hyper macho bodybuilders that have, they swear they have no breaking point. And it's like, no, it's like,
Yeah, that's what I'm kind of talking about. Yeah.
Like I'm as doggy as it gets, man. Like I get, like, a big way to prove this is like, it's like, how lean do you get, man? Like how long can you exist in that suck and pull something out, right? Like that's how you can tell, like who's a dog, who's not. I get there because I respect my limits, because I understand that I have a breaking point. That's how you drive your car as fast as possible, I guess, right? It's like you understand like the details of the machine, and like what you have to be careful and what you have to maintain and what you have to look out for. So I hate those situations because especially when we're prepping, they at some point they hit their breaking point. It's like, we found out the hard way, bro. Like, and maybe it's not during that prep, but maybe it's like post bodybuilding where like there's just all sorts of like just twisted, and like they don't even look like bodybuilders anymore. Like they don't even train no more. And it's because, again, they didn't respect the fact that we do have limits, that everyone has a breaking point. Everyone has a point where, they will tap out on something. And you just have to know what it is.
But I think so. Like sometimes it's the ego, right? Because I know back in the day, I was like very motivated, driven, and I was that guy that's going to go across the middle and get clobbered by the middle linebacker, and then stand up and go, yeah, MFer. Like I took that.
Yeah.
But like you said, it's like I learned there's some breaking points, and I ended up having binges and things like that. So I think a lot of times it's like the ego. And what do you think, like, as far as like, what's the consequence of actually, like, let's say you're successful in pushing yourself. Let's say I didn't binge. I'm like, okay, I'm totally successful. I get to the stage, but maybe I went 110 miles an hour when I should have been going 80. Like, what have you seen as far as like a negative consequence of kind of approaching, whether it's contest prep or whether it's just how we're approaching hypertrophy or fat loss or whatever phase we're trying to do? What are some of those negative consequences that you've kind of come across?
Man, I guess the fake dog, like when it comes to training, they get hurt at some point, but like your body heals really, really efficiently. I guess like if you take the right steps afterwards, like it's crazy. It's crazy the things I've done to myself, and like now it's like nothing, yeah, so your body physically, it's just a little bit more straightforward than your mind. So for me, it's more so, it's the mental health things that I worry about more so with people, because that stuff so much more complicated, so much more convoluted, and that's where I guess I see this sort of like, I have no limit, willing to do whatever it takes to get there mentality, like really, really mess people up. I like to compare. There's certain aspects of it, especially like contest prep, that are similar to combat sports, specifically boxing, where like you will have boxers say that, like, you know what, after that fight I had, I was never the same. Like I came out that ring a different person. And I prep does the exact same thing to you if you're not careful. Who you come out of that prep will be a totally different person. You can frame that to leverage it in a positive way, or it can be the other way. But like that, I think that will happen. I think that will happen to most people. I do think we have like all these dormant things in our brains when it comes to experiencing periods of prolonged malnutrition and getting down to these extreme low levels of body fat that just like turn on. That's just something you have to, it's just something you have to respect, man. And if you respect it, you're only going to give up as much of you as you should, I think. Which might even mean for some people, like folding, like being like, you know what, this is not worth it. Like I've actually, I've had bodybuilders do that on me, where it's like, you know what, it's been great, it's been very sensible, like I like where we're going, you're giving me exactly what I signed up for, but it's just not worth it. And ironically, it was one of these guys that when we first started, it was a bodybuilder that presented, they could introduce me to this guy, and he's like, hey, this is Coach Berto, you guys are gonna prep. And I was just kind of giving him like just like a little spiel about what he can expect, and all he kept doing was interrupting by saying like, I want to do whatever it takes, bro. And I'm like, bro, like this is not a fucking movie. Like,
yeah, it is. It's Rocky 8, man.
And what ended up happening was at some point during that prep, he broke. He was just like, that's it. I can't. And I respect the fact that he did that, because great, you know, you took a moment finally to think this way. And then also, but I also think that maybe we wouldn't have been in this situation had you just been okay with the fact that, like, just like everyone else, you can tap out. You do have that breaking point. So yeah, that's the kind of athlete I hate working with. The ones that kind of like have to live through like real dogs, man. They don't got to tell you, man. They don't got to tell you. They don't got to dress a certain way. They don't have to talk about it. They don't frame their persona like, oh, this is like being like their main characteristic, their personality, if you will. They just are, man. You know? Yeah, like Brian Whitaker's a real dog. He never told you he was a dog, but he was a real dog. So, but he respected his limits. That's part of the, like, if you talk to Brian long enough, you get a sense for that.
He doesn't have an ego. He's humble.
He's got an ego. No, he's got an ego. He's an athlete.
Well,
he's
an
an
athlete.
I mean.
You know, it's
but he's got it under control. You know,
exactly.
It's the other way around, right? Yeah.
Let me reframe that. He's intelligent. He's an intelligent bodybuilder. Mm-hmm. Like he knows how to pick his spots. You know, like you look at his diet setup on his website. It's like, okay, there's a low day, there's a moderate day, and there's a high day. So he's balancing things out. It's like he kind of has the way it's set up. It's like we're digging or we're easing up when we need to. We're digging, we're easing up. And so, yeah, like sometimes these people that just really want to grind because they're just overeager, super motivated, highly competitive. I mean, those are all good traits to have, but they need to be in check. Because otherwise, man, it's counterproductive. And I'm a good example of getting on stage at 160 pounds when I had no business being 160 pounds. I should have been 170 pounds. So I was basically just eating through tissue, you know, because I was too driven and had too much of an ego. And the thing is I wasn't coachable either back then. So even if, let's say, you were like, hey, Jeff, man, like, you should be doing this. Like, you need to back off. You know, we need to have refeeds, tone some of that volume down. Don't go to failure as much. I wasn't ready to be coached. So it's like when we take athletes on, like you have to be willing to be coachable. You know, I'm not saying that we're dictators. You have to do what we say to do, but just in a sense, you have to be coachable, be a little bit humble in order to allow someone else to kind of help you, especially if, you know, someone's a lot more experienced. So yeah, man, it was hard lessons for me back then. Like I could have been a pro like way sooner, but yeah, just lesson learned now.
Yeah, it's even something, I guess, more frustrating about knowing that you got there late because you did unnecessary work, right? Or there's like some people like they live under the idea of I'm going to do a little extra because I'd rather kind of die on my feet sort of deal, right? And it's like you can go really far with that to the point where like you've gone way too far. Like it can get you somewhere, but at the same time, it could also have you competing 10 pounds lighter than you need to be, as you know. So
you know me, man. I love my tennis analogies. It's like a big server, right? Like they want to serve 140 miles an hour when they really should be serving 125. So that way there's more control and they could place it better.
Mm-hmm.
So basically I was like trying to serve 140 miles an hour through those preps. And all I kept doing is hitting balls way out of court. So yeah, I think it's just like having someone who's just willing to like allow us to kind of help them in that regards can go a long ways. As far as working, like saying like people we prefer to work with or don't, like what about like contest prep? Like if you have a candidate, like you get this intake and they've been training, you know, at least a couple of years or so, and they're in a good position to prep. So we got that initial call, it's all organized. What's that trajectory look like for you?
You know, I think more than anything, their whys just have to be in line. They legitimately want to do it for ratios that are more intrinsic than extrinsic, right? It's like, the physique is kind of proof of it's like your paycheck basically, right? But it's all the skills you acquired like throughout the process, all the positive changes that took place. Like that's what I want. People who want to prep for the challenge. I'm probably overcomplicated. Yeah, for the challenge more than anything else. And the challenge has to do more with like controlling themselves, right? Like being in command of themselves, like of the good parts about them, the bad parts that they don't know yet. Those are the sort of people I want to guide. And those are the people that honestly, like things usually turn out pretty good for them. This was one of the reasons that like, man, like there's, I love finding gym rats that love going to the gym, eating a certain way and just look amazing, but they have no ambition to compete. There was a young lady actually that like at the gym I go to, broke my heart when she told me she was going to compete. I was like, oh my God, you have got to be kidding me. But I was happy because I knew she loved it to the point where it's just like, it's just, you know, something different. But I thought it was just a great tale to share with other lifters. It's like, hey, do you compete? Because she looked like she competed like all the time. Like that's what she looked like. It just amazing shape, structure, muscle bellies, everything. And I'm like, I can't wait for like, in my head, I'm like imagining all these scenarios where people are asking her, do you compete? And she's like, nah, I just like going to the gym. And it gets people thinking a certain way. It's like, oh man, like she don't need anyone to approve of her work. Like she's just here working on her little project every day and doesn't care what you think about it. So yeah, I think I like athletes that they want to do this because they just want to elevate that to another level, but it has almost nothing to do with like they only signed up for the goal to see all these positive changes to grow in different ways. And that's really what it comes down to. So those are the people I love to work with, as opposed to the ones that it's like, hey, like I want to make it in the fitness industry and this prep's going to like, you know, like put me on the map, like sort of deal. It's like, that's the wrong end, man. Wrong end.
Yeah, we don't even have to do that nowadays. Like back then, you'd prep because you want to get noticed. Like you can do that now on social media without even prepping. So,
Yeah.
like I
Spike
struggle
you,
with,
dog.
yeah, I struggle with why I was prepping. Like a few months
Yeah.
back, I'm like, do I really want to put my body through this again? Do I want to put through my family through this again? And I was like, just struggling with like a sensible why. Um, finally found it though. I think like I've kind of enjoying, like you said, just the challenge. Like right now, I'm like deep into prep and just feeling hungry is, in a weird way, it's kind of cool. It's kind of enjoyable because it's like feeling deprived. You just get more connected with the things that you're actually missing out on. So it's kind of like the way I could like explain it is like, I go like if my wife goes away for the weekend or a week, I'm here by myself and then she comes back and then you get that first hug or first kiss, hello, it like feels that much sweeter. Like you almost get desensitized, when you're super, super comfortable. So like just in a sense, like being challenged, being deprived, like having to work for something again, it's like making me feel alive, even though I don't have the energy really on a daily basis to, accomplish a lot. But when I do have little spurts, like I am pretty productive, but it's just like that fire that's within. It's like, it's really cool feeling to have. So some of the people that we get, I know it's like they're on the fence, whether they want to compete or not. So I like sometimes those type of people I love working with because it's almost like I get to have that conversation. Like, dude, you got enough muscle. It's there. And oftentimes they're insecure about, like, am I going to be big enough? Am I going to be lean enough? Like all those questions. Like the only way to find out is to actually get in there and challenge yourself, to actually do the damn thing and to go through that process. Cause you're going to learn so much about yourself, just challenging yourself in that way. So sometimes I like pushing people towards it, even though they might be on the fence about it. Because sometimes they just need a little encouragement. They just need that little nudge. And what's kind of cool too is like, how it is. You go through this process, you learn how to lose body fat. You learn how to get to like this extreme physique that's very cool. It's very rewarding at the end of it. But then also coming out of that process, you get to transition back into quote unquote normalcy, back into off season. So, in a year or two, you're learning how to change your body composition. You're acquiring all these tools, and then that's empowering because, moving ahead, like whether I do a show or don't do shows, you have all these tools. You're empowered to do what you want to do with your physique, whether that's put muscle on, lose weight, whatever, you're empowered. That's what I love about seeing like some of our athletes go through a year or two with us, like going through the entirety of that process. So sometimes people just need that little nudge, and because a lot of times we're just like narrow-minded too. Like we're only seeing what's in front of us. Like I want to gain muscle like right now, or I want to lose fat like right now. But if you take that big step back and go say, okay, if I go through a year or two of this big picture process, like it doesn't matter like how much progress you actually make. The fact that you're going to be empowering yourself with a lot of like hands-on education and experience.
Yeah, well, it's kind of the same, right? It's like I like meet those athletes, and then they're all about it. They're great students at the game, but they just don't care about competing. Like, those are like, wow, you're really doing this for you, because competing used to be less accessible. There was just less shows, right? And there was bodybuilding. That's all you got to pick. There was even no novice, right, Jeff? Like you got to experience those days where it was just man or woman.
When I first started, it was just bodybuilding. It was men and women. There was novice though. Like they had juniors, they had novice, but yeah, there was no men's physique, no bikini, like none of those divisions. Just it was kind of cool. Like it was kind of raw. Like it was kind of a nice time. But yeah, it's just so accessible now. Like shows are a dime a dozen now, and there's just so many different divisions. So it's people have more access to it, which is a good thing, I guess.
Yeah, but I think sometimes people feel shame when they get asked like, "Have you ever competed?" And they're like, "No," and it's like, Like it shouldn't be that way. Like it doesn't make you less of it. Like, I think in some ways it makes you more, especially in the current environment.
Well, you could define bodybuilding any way you want, whether you're doing it on stage or you're just doing it for self-improvement. Like, you're still a bodybuilder. I think sometimes like competitive bodybuilders, like sometimes we kind of look down on people who are just more recreational. Like, oh, you're not doing what I'm doing, bro. Like, this is another level. I'm like, no, like like the people who are on social media, like they get in great shape to look the way they do, and then they self-promote and they create a business and then they help people. Like, it's a different form of bodybuilding. It's a different vessel as far as like trying to help people.
Yeah, and quite often with the competitive bodybuilders, it's like your body. Often what you see, not all the time. It's like your bodybuilding has the reins over you. It's not the other way around. Whereas like people who have resisted the urge to just get up there just so they can be part of this exclusive club and feel like they're officially like part of this like lifting community. People who like have said, like, never mind that. I'm just gonna keep doing like my thing. Like again, like those are just folks that I'm like, wow, like you are, like I respect you a lot for that. But also, like, if you ever want to compete, you're going to be really good at this because, you're doing it, like you said, Jeff, for the right reasons.
There was this lady I saw. We were in San Francisco, like hanging out for the day, and there was this lady. I don't know if she was homeless or not. I mean, she looked that way. She might not have been. I don't know.
Yeah.
But she was carrying these dumbbells. They were like, I think maybe 5-10 pounds, somewhere in there. And she was just walking. And I'm like, this lady, I think this, because I can tell she lived there. I'm like, she probably just carries these things all day long and walks these hills. She was so freaking lean. And I know she didn't compete. I mean, she was like jacked and just shredded. Like, she was more shredded than a lot of like highly competitive bodybuilders on stage. Like, just striated triceps, her delts were striated, and she was just kind of just walking up and down the street with these dumbbells. And I'm like, if she really wanted to, she can walk to the local competition and probably mop up if she really wanted to. And she probably has no clue what contest prep even entails. But it kind of just shows like obviously the things that she does on a daily basis, like the habits. She's resistance training to a certain degree, and she's highly active. I don't know what her diet looked like, but I would imagine it's not like unhealthy. So yeah, it was kind of cool just like seeing her and just realizing like there is no like perfect structure or set structure that she has. So I thought that was pretty inspiring.
Yeah, I guess my mission at the end with like all my athletes is to give them give fitness a much deeper purpose than like maybe where it started. So even if you were one of those folks that, we've been going over it, like, bodybuilding, has the reins over them, and, they're hyper fixated, and, the competitive stuff has just not added to their life, but taken away. Like you can come back from that. And I think that's at the end, outside of like their specific goals. I know that part of how we get there is accomplishing some of the things that they want to accomplish. But at the end, like more than anything, like what I want to do with my people is like get them to the point where this is just a very important form of self-care that they will do forever. And I want them to have their skill set be so polished when it comes to this, to the point where it's like, okay, even if at some point it's like really low on the priority list, like for them, it's like not even top 10, not even the top 15, their health is still kind of there. And a lot of the things, it should be up high. Like health should be like top 3, in my opinion. I've showed them how to fend for themselves, and they have these systems in place, these habits in place that, they don't even think of. So yeah, I guess I see this as like lifting in a way, because like, again, gravity takes no days off. You're always going to be fighting gravity until the day it finally does win, right? I see this as no different as like always like being that mindset of like I'm always like gonna be a learner, right? I'm always about educating myself, but it's just like in this case has more to do with like the human body, sort of deal. So like at the end, like that's like even if I do get someone where I'm like, man, you are doing this for the wrong reasons. Your stuff is all backwards. It's all sorts of broken. Like it's like, okay, we're gonna do some of the things that you want to like check off your list that are gonna make you feel competent, that are gonna make you feel like, damn, I'm worthy human being, things like that. And then eventually, you find a deeper meaning for all this like bodybuilding thing that we do. And that can take many different shades. Like again, like we know a few guys that like now this like they bodybuild but they run, you know, right?
Yeah,
But
quite a few of those. Yep.
But a lot of the roots came from like this sort of stuff. So, yeah, I think at the end, like regardless of what this person's like goal is, like I always have that goal, like way out there. It's like at some point, I want to make it so that you know no other way of living. Like this is just what you do. Because the older I get, the more I do appreciate the fact that it's done so much for my health metrics. So yeah, at the end, like I'm gonna hide the pill, man. Like, and I'm sure you feel the same way too, Jeff. That you know they don't know they're getting this as part of the curriculum, but they will learn it over time.
That's it. I mean, I'm 52. I'm still doing this damn thing on a high level, but I'm doing it in a way that's, I would say, far more balanced than my younger days when I was a lot more hyper-focused on that minutia I was talking about earlier. And it's like that gentleman that I got the opportunity to talk with yesterday, who's 55. Like, yeah, he wants to be jacked, but I mean, his situation is like overall health. You know, he needs to focus on that because, like you said, gravity's going to be here till the last day. So we might as well lift as much as we possibly can, you know, and fight gravity as much as we can. So yeah, and again, I'm proof at 52. You don't have to be hyper-focused. Like you can learn practicality and sustainability and not just, you know, be just like that one trick pony we talked about where it's like you have to be just focused on one way of doing things, but incorporating a blend and continue to thrive. So that's kind of where I'm at now. But anything else you feel like we need to wrap up?
No, it's important work we do, Jeff. Fun work. It really is. Yeah, probably do it till gravity finally defeats me at some point.
Remember I said I was going to retire after the end of this year?
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I might have to go back on that. We'll see.
There's always something you learn from like every prep, every adventure. So the bodybuilders never retire.
Yeah.
They're worse than boxers. Seriously.
Well, I know I'm not going to retire from lifting. That I do know.
Yeah.
I'm always going to be in the gym because that is therapeutic. Yeah, that's another benefit other than, you know, just looking better. Like you actually feel better when you're moving some weight.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, shoot. Okay, we'll leave it here. We got to go help our people, Jeff. We love to be needed. Yeah. All right. Let's get it.
Peace.